This is a fabulous car to drive.
It's like you drive a big truck.
To own this car make me proud.
It's stylish but understated. It's not flash.
It flies.
I will never sell the car, except if my son tells me, "Daddy, I'm hungry."
The Maserati badge represents one thing, a passion for racing. Today, if you buy the modern air-conditioned, leather-clad Maserati, the supercar for the 90s, you're actually buying heritage. You're buying a racing heritage which goes right back to the 1920s. The company was actually founded by Alfieri Maserati, who had a passion for racing, and opened a workshop dealing with a whole variety of cars, including the famous Isotta Fraschini. This was in 1914. But it wasn't long before he began building his own cars and developing his own racing heritage. Alfieri, having a good eye for marketing, asked his brother Mario to design a badge. He based this on the trident from a statue in the market square of their hometown of Bologna, and that is still there for you to see today. In 1926, the first car to wear the badge made a sensational debut at Targa Florio. That was in fact the famous Tipo 26.
This is a 1931 Maserati. The model is a 26M. It's a 2.5 liter straight 8 supercharged Grand Prix car. This car's history starts with Tim Birkin, who is best known as one of the Bentley boys, having won at Le Mans and so forth. Tim bought this car in 1931 from the factory and raced it first in the French Grand Prix, finished 5th, took the car to Brooklands, set the mountain course lap record at Brooklands with this car. The car then went on to Whitney Straight. Whitney Straight was a 20-year-old college student at Cambridge University. He wasn't allowed to have a private motor car, so he had a Grand Prix Maserati for racing and a twin-engine aeroplane with which to go to Brooklands. Back in those days, when you ran at Brooklands, many of the races were handicap races. The slow cars could go straight through one part of the course. The medium-speed cars had to go through a bit of a wiggle, and the very fast cars had to go through a rather sharp chicane. And the color of the tail showed you where you had to go, and that allowed the other drivers to know what the guy in front was going to do. And the white tails were the fastest cars. This car had a white tail for Brooklands, and Whitney Straight left the tail white during the entire time he owned the car. This is a fabulous car to drive. You can drive it as a street car, you can sort of putter around in it, but when you want to make this car go, it flies. This car will easily run on a straight line basis with a modern Porsche. It's got a top speed of 142 miles an hour. It is a much, much faster car than what a lot of people would ever believe. The engine in this car is a twin overhead cam, straight 8, supercharged engine. The suspension is very modern for its time. It's a fabulous piece of engineering. You're going to know what these cars are all about. You've got to see them in motion, you've got to hear them, you've got to smell the castor oil, smell the exhausts and so forth. Even though I've owned this car for quite some time now, I still thrill at just looking at the badge on the bonnet. In fact, one of my favorite things to do with this car is to, in a quiet place when there's nobody around, park the car, just stand back and just look at it.
The next car to be produced was the V4.
which was the first ever racing car to have a 16-cylinder engine. This car was put in for the speed trials and it achieved the world record for 10 kilometres at Cremona at a speed of 246 kilometres per hour. The death of Alfieri in 1932 left the company without a leader, but the family pulled together and they were quite determined that they were going to succeed on their own. The face of motor racing Grand Prix cars changed in 1934 with the advent of the Germans appearing on the scene with Auto Union and Mercedes. Maserati, being a small company, not with an open checkbook from the Bundesbank like the German titans, decided that their efforts were better spent on producing voiturette racing cars.
In the mid-1930s, Maserati were still not marketing their cars to any extent because they were selling them on the back of the Grand Prix success. So in 1936, when the 6cm was introduced at the Milan Auto Show and caused a sensation, the subsequent demand was so great that they couldn't keep pace with it. Ironically though, they were still making no money.
In early 1937, the Orsi family from Modena purchased the Maserati company from the brothers under the direction of the Orsi family. The Maserati company produced an enormous number of successful racing cars, sports cars and road cars. Their achievements in these fields culminated in the year of 1957 when Juan Manuel Fangio won the World Championship in a Maserati 250F. At the same time, the company had entered into the World Sports Car Championship. The car was called the Monster and it was the 450S.
This is a 450S Maserati built in 1957, an extremely rude car, very difficult to drive. If you drive the car on a low RPM, it's like you drive a big truck. It's very difficult to handle, very heavy. When the RPM goes higher, I mean 4,000 or 5,000 RPM, the impression is to drive a 400 horsepower go-kart. Drivers like Fangio, like Moss, like Berra, they didn't like it to drive the car because it was very difficult to handle. It's a very light car, you have the big engine in front and in the back side you just the tank. So when you have a full tank in the back you have 250 liters of gasoline and 24 liters of oil. But during the race, when the gasoline goes down, the car becomes very light in the back side, so it's quite difficult to handle. During the Mille Miglia of 2 years ago, I had still in mosque close to my car. We were waiting to start. I was looking the car, remembering when he was racing this car in 1957, and my question to him was how he could handle the car on road races. And he just told me, well, we had to cross our fingers and go. That was the only way to run this car. One of my best thrills with this car was in Monza. And you put the fifth gear and you reach 300 or more kilometers an hour. You go under a bridge before the Ascari turn, and there you have the real thrill because you don't know if you can brake or not, if you can make the turn or you go in the sand. You know why I turn? Because I was thinking how much it's going to cost to refurbish the car. I say, at the last minute I say, okay, let's turn.
In the last race of the season for the World Sports Car Championship, the Caracas Venezuelan Grand Prix, the entire team of 450Ss was destroyed. This sadly meant, A, that Maserati was second, not first in the championship, and secondly, it meant they had no sports cars left at all. Together with the financial problems that they were suffering in the factory, and the fact they had no sports cars, the company withdrew from official works racing. However, this was to be the dawn of a new era for Maserati. At the Geneva Motor Show in 1957, Maserati unveiled a new motor car which was totally different from what had been seen before. This car was the 3500 GT.
My name is Adolfo Orsi, and I have the same name of my grandfather, who bought the factory in 1937 from Maserati Brothers. I have two 3500 GT Vignale Spider. One is the prototype and the other is a 1960 production car. The prototype was first shown at the Turin show in '59, and the production began in the early months of 1960. The cars are a bit different. No one part is interchangeable between both cars. The special things of the prototypes are a different grille, different side ones, dashboards, seats. The purpose was to check the taste of the customers and to decide how to do the production car. To own this car and to drive this car make me proud of what my family did for the Maserati history. The 3500 GT was a very important car in Maserati history because it was a big commercial success and therefore allowed the company to become a producer of GT cars. When I was a little boy, 6 or 7 years old, I had small Maseratis because at that time the Maserati did a small production of electric car for child, and I have driven myself some of these cars. The pleasure for me is to drive a car built for my family. I don't think there are many persons in the world that could be so lucky as I am.
In 1959, the world still had recognized the achievements of Maserati in racing, and there were a number of people who approached the factory to try to persuade them to re-enter the arena once again. The factory actually said no, they would not, as works teams, ever enter cars, but they did agree to design cars for private teams. And in that time they produced the very famous Tipo 60 and 61, always known as the bird cage, driven by very many famous drivers to many great race successes. In 1963, they introduced the Mistral and the Quattroporte, which was the very first four-door saloon car ever produced by Maserati.
The introduction of the strange beast, the Quattroporte, was a desperate attempt to try and make some money at a time of serious financial difficulties, about to be bailed out by Citroën. So they decided that they'd have to market it as a luxury car. So for the first time with Maserati, we get a brochure with a thick card cover, onion skin inserts, and very significantly, the first page contains motoring heritage with pictures of 1920s racing cars.
By the time 1971 had come around, Citroën had decided that they should buy the total shareholding of the Maserati company from the Orsi family. Over this transitional period, one of the models still being produced by Maserati was a sensational two-seater coupe and spider powered by a 5-litre engine which many people considered to be a rival of the Ferrari Daytona. This car was the Maserati Ghibli.
This car is a Ghibli SS Maserati, naturally. It was made in 1973. One of the very last made, because in 73 they only made 5 cars like this. And it has a very powerful engine, 335 horsepower. It is a very speed car, very fast, 280 kilometers of top speed. And the car is quite in good condition. You see original color, original interior and so on. I like it very much. I drive the car at least every month. It's like meeting an old friend after a lot of time. You don't think to the friend for many days. And then when you meet him or her, everything is like the last time. And not only for the power of the car or for the handling or for the braking, also for the total sensation. You are in a little world and outside things are not so important. When you're driving fast, you have to be very careful, but if you're lucky to find the right place to drive fast, you have all the same to be very careful, because the speed gives you a sensation of power and gives you a total misunderstanding of what happens around you. Everything is moving slowly in comparison with you, so you have to be very, very careful. But when the power is very strong and you push the throttle with this car, it's quite a sensation, really. These cars are really special. They were handmade, and there is, in the shape of the car and in the technicals of the car, you can see the people who made them. Can you see that in modern cars? I will never sell the car, except if my son tells me, "Daddy, I'm hungry." That's one reason.
Following the Ghibli, the era of the mid-engine sports car appeared. And Maserati's contribution to this new layout of a motor car was represented in the Maserati Bora and the Maserati Merak.
It's a 1972 Maserati Bora, left-hand drive. And this car is really the first fruit of the tie-up between Citroën and Maserati, and there's a lot of Citroën influence on the car. The idea was to combine a lot of the front-engine sort of GT touring characteristics of a front-engine car into a mid-engine car. This wasn't a racer for the road. The whole idea was to produce an elegant and civilized car that somebody could travel to the South France in, but gaining all the mid-engine advantages of the styling and of the the handling and sort of manoeuvrability effectively. What I like about it is it's stylish but understated. It's not flash, which I enjoy because I like to be able to drive it into the local town and get out of the car and people not to turn around and say, what a plonker. It's one of the most comfortable cars to sit in on a long journey because they're sort of reclining seats. Other little touches like the pedal box moves in and out on a hydraulic ram so that you sit in the car and instead of moving the seat backwards and forwards you press a button and all the pedals glide towards you. There you are sitting on a motorway at 80, 90 miles an hour and you press the wrong knob and the accelerator pedal comes towards you, and if your foot's in the right position you go a lot faster, which you know, can be entertaining really. You switch the engine on, and of course, being a V8, it sort of shudders into life. A friend of mine always joked that he can always tell when my car's coming because his cup of tea starts rattling on the table. Because the engine's got so much torque that it's just very easy to drive in traffic. It doesn't overheat, so you can potter. So most journeys in any car start off in traffic. But once you get on the open road and use more than 3,000 revs, the whole thing changes. You suddenly realise you've got an engine from the 450S Racer in the back.
If the Ghibli Bora were the cars of the 70s, then the bi-turbo was the car of the 80s for Maserati. The marketing of the bi-turbo was significantly different to previous Maseratis. What happened was, although the car looked like a Ford or a Fiat, it drove incredibly fast and it had to be marketed to the supercar buyer.
In early 1997, Fiat Auto SPA decided that Maserati would be better managed through the joint division with Ferrari. Small volume producers understand each other better than large volume producers understanding small volume producers. This can only be a good thing for Maserati. La legend continua.